Welcome everyone back to Literary Festival. This is the second talk of the day, started at 3 p.m., titled Cross-Generation Writing, Imagine My City.
Our 9th Macau Literary Festival. This is our panel 6, Cross-Generation Writing, Imagine My City, Writers Dialogue, Local New Books Release. I'm going to give the mic to our moderator, Joe, to present our writers. 我將個麥交俾你啦，Joe。
Okay, thank you, Alice. 唔該晒 Alice。咁我哋今晚
So today, the talk will be conducted in Cantonese. Thank you, the Literary Festival. This is a very precious opportunity today to have all these two writers today. They are also my friends, and also a very interesting combination of writers of cross generations in Macau. One, the guy next to me is Lawrence Lay. I'm sure like we all have all these slashes between us in terms of our responsibilities and our expertise. You know, Lawrence Lay. He is a multi-award winners. So Lawrence is a very seasoned writer, especially Macau playwright. So he has a very prolific works along all these years. So later we'll discuss about his works. We not only talk about cross-generation writing, but also we will talk about our feelings and response towards Macau and the city. As a writer, this is very important for us to express our feelings towards the city. So we still have lots of time for this talk, so we'll come back to it. So the one next to Lawrence is Lin Ge. He's a very talented youngster. He's also a designer, a graphic designer. So he's actually he's very good at doing graphics, but also an illustrator, and also a poet and writer. In general, we can call Lin Ge an artist with using his various means to create and express and to write. So today, behind us, we can see there are two books. They are their works. On the right-hand side is the book called Out of Tune by Lin Ge, a compilation of short stories. You can see on the book cover, it's actually created by him. And Lin Ge is also the designer of our visual image of this literary festival. So for the one behind Lawrence is a book called The Slaughterhouse, a recent work by Lawrence. Maybe some of you have read this book already. If you are, but I strongly recommend you that to read this if you really want to know the recent history of Macau, especially the recent decades about Macau. When I'm reading this book, it seems like a cassette tape in my mind, like reliving the whole narratives and history of recent Macau. So let's start. I'll give the floor to Lawrence and Lin Ge to let them to introduce to you the books as well as their thoughts about creations and writing. So Lawrence, hi, good afternoon. Let me add something about this. The cover design of this book is actually also designed by Lin Ge as well. The book cover of my book, The Slaughterhouse. So this book has its background set here, exactly where we are sitting. This where we are sitting now was actually a slaughterhouse. This is the background. The story begins with a slaughterhouse where there was a piglet was about to be slaughtered here. Yet this pig wanted to escape. And that's where the story started. So Joe mentioned just now that this story actually spanned over several decades. It's true, because it covers a history of 30 to 40 years since 1980s in Macau. So I write about the story under the background, with the background of the modern Macau development. So, for example, when you drive to in Taipa, near the Ocean Garden, there was a little tunnel, right? A little passage. Near the Roosevelt Hotel, right? There was a very short tunnel. There's also a gas station, right? After you pass the tunnel. So there was actually, back then, that's where we wait for ferries and boats. So there's a hill up the gas station. Whenever we took the boat from Macau to Taipa, we will look up to this hill. So this little hill is like a cliff. You can still see the trace on the hill where there's a Qingdao beer imprinted on the hill, on this cliff. There's this commercial sign there. So in my book, I actually included this. So this is one of the elements that I put in my book. Let me talk about in the 1980s, where Lin Ge was not born yet, I'm afraid. You know, that's very interesting that we are sitting together here now. You know, I experienced everything back in the 80s. So this is a very interesting conversation right now, a cross-generation conversation with Lin Ge. Now, let me give the floor to Lin Ge and let him tell us about his book. So for me, as Joe has mentioned, we have lots of slashes, like slashes in terms of different identities in Korea. You know, why I am touching so many different fields is not out of desire, but is actually out of uncertainty and insecurity, that I wish to try different things and different media and different means to create, in terms of graphic, in terms of words as well. When I first started creating, I started with poetry, because I feel like poetry helps me to better express myself, things that's not easily to be spoken about. That's a very good means. But later, I started getting to know other genres. At the very beginning, at the early years, my very motivation of creating is to know about myself. After 10 years of creation, of creating, it's a journey of self-searching and self-discovery. Along these years, it is not easy to find a goal, like it's not easy to find a conclusion. For me, I'm not a person who's good at expressing myself, especially when it comes to love, when it comes to giving love and feeling love. I'm not very expressive, yet I have to use my way to express myself. So that's why I use narratives, or simply by listening to other people's romantic stories or stealing others' romantic stories and put myself in their shoes to think, what would I feel if I were them? You know, it feels like I am a cold robot to know about others, to learn love. Along these years of creating, I realized monotonous. not we are a combination of various elements, of various feelings and various parts, of different proportions. People separate a person in terms of gender, like you're either male or female. I believe that we are not 100% male or 100% female. When it comes to decision making, for example, when it comes to deny something or to agree with something, is not a single homogeneous gender. So, for example, sometimes it's 70% of us, the us that we know about, the 30%, the rest of 30% probably it's uncertain. So this is just an example that I want to say. There are some parts in us that's actually often ignored, yet to be discovered. So whenever we do our choices in our life, make decisions, we listen to the big parts of our life, yet that we need to still pay attention to the small parts. So why my book is called Out of Tune? When we play the music, we always play according to the score. But who make the score? Who make the new score? Because there's tune implied in the score, right? So in this book, I want to explore this idea of out of tune. So for me, when I'm creating and writing, I constantly ask and challenge myself and keep circling on a certain issue or certain part of myself. So when I write about the city and write about myself, for example, when I'm reading The Slaughterhouse, as Lawrence mentioned, I wasn't born yet in that historical background. Yet, with the words in that slaughterhouse, especially the elements and the visual elements that Lawrence had just mentioned, I can actually be transported into that historical background and to understand the city once again and to know about ourselves once again. So if I have to continue my creative life, I believe it's important for me and for us to understand and to know more about the city where we grew up and where we live right now. You know, for me, I am also a novelist. I like especially writing things with lots of histories. So since we're in Macau, something very interesting is that comparing to other places in the world, let's say, for example, a Sino-Japanese war or the Republic of China's establishment, all these like historical events, there are lots of documents, there are lots of even fictional stories or creations that's related to all these major events in the world as our foundations or cornerstones to create, right? For example, right now there is a movie about Chinese female volleyball team. It's a biographical movie to talk about a legendary coach, a female coach, Lang Ping. That gives an interesting, very perspective in the background of many historical events. But for Macau, there are lots of things are disappeared and vanished without trace. When Lawrence wrote those things, when I read his writings, it actually helped me to recreate the images of Macau in my mind. There are very few people writing things about that, be it documentary genres or documentaries as in movies or documentary literature. There are very few references existing right now. It's really difficult for us to recall things, even those things happening centuries away. the only thing we can rely on are actually archives or documents that's left by our predecessors. So when it comes to documents, you know, I wrote about previously. I wrote about a story about assassination of the Amaral, General Amaral. There are lots of versions of this historical event. In Chinese, in English, in Portuguese, they are all telling a different stories. Yet, this is a maze in Macau. But what Linger just now mentioned, it all relies on yourself. Like, what if when he was talking about score, what if the score is wrong? Days ago when my daughter came back home, and she handed to me a paper, an exam paper that says that my answers were wrong, but I realized that my daughter's not wrong. Actually, the exercise was wrong. It's not my daughter's mistake. It's actually the teacher's mistake. So that's what I want to say is that what if the score is wrong? What if the tune is wrong? Should we follow the tune or should we actually sing according to our tunes? So this is something everyone here that are facing now, a challenge that we are facing now. But the interesting thing is that what we are facing now is a completely brand new world right now. Let's say the world was different maybe before 2000. No, before 2000, let's say, maybe the world was actually more or less the same. Yet after 2000, especially in the past decade, the world has advanced and changed rapidly. Now we are talking about fake news and even things. And for example, like the explosion of information, we have social media like Facebook, WeChat, and various media. For example, now people don't watch TV, don't watch news, don't watch newspapers, but we rely on social media. It seems like our world has become more chaotic. The tune becomes more cacophonous. It's a cacophony. We are confused. We are lost in this maze. So this is what we are facing now, a very special situation, what we're experiencing in this zeitgeist in the past 2 decades. So for you both, Linga, you were born in the 1980s. For Lawrence, I'm an Asian man. So for me, I'm actually a middle-aged guy. So in various these eras, how do you see creating?
Well, in the past, when we try to convey our memory, we don't have a lot of ways. We just try to write or through literary documents to pass on. However, things have changed. And now we have developed many different ways. Through images, through TV, through movies, Facebook, and other social medias. Well, for me, you talk about the fake news. It caused chaos. However, in terms of passing on memories, we used to use words to describe things that happened. And this is accessible for readers of different ages, and they will feel different accordingly. So in the stories that I mentioned, for example, in one of the streets in Macau, there's a place in which I'm very attached to it because I used to live in that area. I used to live in an ancient mansion in which there were like lots of households inside. So for Lin Ge, who's born in the 1980s, when he reads the same passage, he might have a different feeling for that. So for literature, it offers different interpretation for different readers. So now we use a lot of images to convey our message. We use different scenes in TV or movies to convey the message. So it's different when we use words because it conjures up different imagery or feelings. And so now we are talking in a cross-generation way, talking about things that happened in the past. So for my book, for readers of different ages, they also gave me different feedbacks and responses. So for the same spot or same scene, readers of different ages will have different feedback or feelings. So just now I mentioned about the hill, the advertisement, the cliff in Taipa. And so now, which has become a slaughterhouse nowadays. Before, I'm sorry. So right now, I can feel that in the past it's a slaughterhouse, but now it's different. So through literature, we can create this sense. And for Lin Ge, he's got a very diversified way of conveying the message, for example, through image, illustration. Well, I agree with you, Lawrence. I think it's not only about literature, it's also about history, because for me, as I was born in the 1980s, I'll describe myself as a person who was born in a stage, in an era in which IT experienced a very rapid development. There was internet during high school at my time, and I read on newspapers or magazines about this new technology, and it became accessible to everyone. And so messages have been spread more easily, and we started learning about it. And we also experienced this rapid development of IT and the spreading of messages. And we have different channels to be in contact with different kinds of resources. And we can get that immediately online. And we don't try to figure out the source of the links. And as a slashy myself, I think I'm also affected by it. When I try to learn something or try something new, it becomes much easier than before. So when I have to connect with something that happened in the past, I think history plays a very important role. It's easy to get a lot of information online or from different resources, but we need a direction. So just now you mentioned about the place in Macau, Wan Gok Wai. It's an alley. Initially, I think it's the part 2, the illusion, Wan Gok Wai. I think it's a place. It's a small place, and it's very easy to communicate with people there or to connect with the people there. And I remember it was a rainy day when I was there, and I felt the distance between people, and there were some slopes inside, and the place was very narrow. And as mentioned in the book, you can see the difference nowadays when compared to the place that was described in the book. And for my creation or illustration work, I actually want to record some things about my life. And I think there are lots of changes happening within a short span of time, for example, in 3 to 4 years. So for other creations, such as image or other forms of art, I think we all have an objective to find or to look for an answer. And we are all living in abundance of information. And sometimes we are lost. And we don't know our own identity. And we have to read. And we have to sort out the history. And be able to identify what actually happened and how things developed. So in the future, when people look at what happened, they also have to learn why things happen or why things have changed. And I'm very curious about you as a writer born in the 80s or as a new generation. Do you think that people of this generation, well, me as a writer or a creator, do you think they don't easily believe in something? Do you think they won't go deep into something? And whenever I hear something, I may have to digest and come up with my own conclusion. Or do you think they care about it or not? So what do you think about the new generation on this? Well, I think they don't care about the facts, and they will just search things online. They will just read it or skim it, and it's just a superficial reading of it, but they don't know about the background of it. However, in the past, we used to read, for example, articles, and you build a foundation or a framework about something. So if you're interested in a certain topic, you try to look for more information and read about them. However, nowadays, we spend only a very short period of time to build up a knowledge on a certain topic. Well, we don't really have the motivation to think or the desire to look for the facts or background about a certain topic or subject. And for Lawrence, I think in terms of your writing, you do a lot of background research or study. Well, Lin Ge mentioned about the conveying of memories in terms of writing or images. Well, I think the difference is not only about the generation. Sometimes when we try to convey the memory, the media that we use will also create a different effect. So when we try to talk about something in the past, we consider about the connection, the hierarchy, which is different. And through writing, it might be much more easier than by image. So for my book, it talks about the changes that happened in economy and the surroundings, the environment, and the identity of people in Macau. So in the 70s and 80s, it's before the handover of Macau. We had lots of Portuguese, Macanese, and we have different circles of people. And so how did they live with each other? And what's the connection between them? So from the 70s to 80s to now, what has changed between these circles of people? And so we can try to express them through writing. Well, if we try to express this through images, it might be challenging. And when we try to describe them through writing, it can also inspire different images or conjure up different imagery. For example, when we try to talk about different places in Macau, like Saiwan, our impression of Saiwan is different now and then. In the past, so there's like a long coast along Saiwan, and many people went dating in Saiwan in the past. So you could probably find lots of lovers or couples in the past dating in Saiwan. Well, nowadays you won't find the same thing. So I'm not sure if people still go dating in Saiwan nowadays. That's because Macau is a very small place, and in the 70s and 80s, it's just like Macau is just like 20 square kilometers. So now it's a double, and the everything is different, including the scenery, the environment, and so in Saiwan there is the governor's house. Yeah, that's how we call it before the handover. And we know that that's the headquarters of the Macau government. And for those the millenniums, they might not know where the governor's house is. And now we got a reclamation outside the Macau governor's house. So it used to be very narrow, and now after the reclamation, the roads are much wider, and we can see the change of the society. And so I think through writing, it creates different feelings. And for illustration or images, they also create another effect. So what do you think? Well, I think for writings, it makes you think and feel, and you might want to find out more about it. However, for images, it's more direct. And for images, sometimes they are like scattered images. And for words, for writings, they are more linear, and you can follow the track. Well, I think it's the story that can touch people. And there are different scenes which talk about joy, sadness, love, and these topics are all related to humans, and that's what we all experience, no matter it's friendship, the struggles of life, the confusion about life. So that's what we all face nowadays, even under the new normal. So in the past, we were thinking about how to buy a piece of land, and nowadays we are talking about mortgage. And I think this is a very interesting topic. And Lawrence works a lot on people, writes a lot about people. And Lin Ge also writes about the stories about the city, about the people. And he's employing a new approach. And even for taking a photo or even for a movie, how realistic you are doing this, it's sometimes difficult to convey the message. So for drama, for theater, for stage, or storybook, it's all about people, a group of people or an individual. There are a lot of tangle between people. And it's your understanding about humanity or human relations. And therefore, you have to understand what the people were doing in the 1970s and their interaction in the 70s. And for example, in the Slaughterhouse, the book that Lawrence wrote, I think identity is a very interesting topic. And there is a character, there is a pretty lady who lives in Hong Kong, and there is a character who's born and raised in Macau, and there is a character who immigrated to Macau. So it's just like a new immigrant who can't speak fluently Cantonese. And there's also a character who's a mixed. So he's got features of like a Portuguese or Americanese. And he's got a Chinese surname with Chinese parents. And the character is not related to Portuguese. And so these are the four main characters in the book. So I'm very interested in these characters.
This is quite a unique Macau story. It only can exist under such a historical background in terms of their kinship, their lineage, the bloodline, and all the amazing stories happening between these four people. Lawrence wrote a story about these four characters. While for Lin Ge, the book called Out of Tune. And on the same article called Out of Tune, there's also about a new immigrant person came to Macau. The person cannot speak very well Cantonese with accent. Actually, the person's actually under the confusion of identity. So we can talk a lot about all these characters, right? So you guys belong to different generations. For me, now as if we are going to a time travel journey, how do you write these people? So when it comes to writing characters, writing people, I will write based on the people around me. I found prototypes of people around me. For example, there's siblings, they're brothers. They born and grew up in Macau. The younger brother actually got a Portuguese passport, while the elder brother was actually left in mainland China. The older brother came to Macau illegally because they both grew up in Macau. No, the youngest brother actually grew up in Macau. That's why the younger brother can have that Portuguese passport, while the elder brother cannot obtain this identity. Especially, the elder brother got discriminated and laughed at because of his accent in Cantonese. So that actually created an effect on the person's characters. The third person. So for the third character, which is like a lady who actually grew up in Hong Kong and raised in Hong Kong, so she has this superiority over Macau people. While the fourth character, legend says that when the person's was delivered as a baby in the hospital, they have this changeling event. So the baby was born born from Portuguese parents, but however, this baby got mistakenly put onto to a Chinese family. Yet the person has a Portuguese blood, but the person grew up in a Chinese family. So if her name is Fatima, if she's silent, people thought she's Portuguese, but she has the Chinese character, Chinese personality. Well, so all of this is real? Yes, this is not fictional. These are real. but I write based on this real friends and people happening around me. So, for example, this person, she can't speak Portuguese, but if she doesn't speak anything, you thought she's Portuguese, but she grew up in a Chinese family. So, these four characters, a very interesting combination of characters, made a huge part of this book, The Slaughterhouse. So these actually are very commonly seen characters in Macau decades ago. But they have different identities, right? They have different values, different views about life, and they have different life stories. So these four characters, they all have their own prototypes that I took from my friends and people I know. So as I mentioned just now, on the little cliff next to the gas station near the ocean garden, I put that element in my story, as well as this slaughterhouse here. I actually used the background of Nam Van, this in 1970s, where there was no land reclamation, when there was still sea off Praia Grande. So not all of these are real for sure. Of course, it's fictional, yet they are all based in real life stories and real life prototypes. So how do you write about people and characters, Lin Ge? For me, I don't do much research, because the stories that I write do not necessarily relate to historical events. I focus more on the present. To change the perspective, my research is basically overhearing people's conversations in daily life, or even on the bus. I will hear people talking about their stories, talking about their everyday life, trivial stuff. After hearing these things, I would think, what if I were them? How would I react? How they feel when they say those things? Their everyday life, it seems like they're very certain about their everyday life, yet it's not that real. It's not that true. I think when they say things in certain, actually is not that certain about lives. So when I write about characters, this is the approach I use. When it comes to character building, I create characters that are not very clean cut. They do not have a very sharp and outstanding characters. So for my novels and my writing, usually you can feel the story is pretty slow. The rhythm is slow. They don't have a very sharp and eye-catching characters or personalities. However, I like to create stories with characters that have a sense elements of roughness, rawness, and lots of complexities. I love creating things that's closer to reality. You know, as I mentioned, creating for me is about self-discovery. You know, nowadays, people at the present, people do not feel that much about identity. They don't think about whether I identify with this place or not. But when it comes to, for example, the new immigrants, when they have gone through certain active change, like when they go overseas to studies, when they go here and go there and leave home, you know, they will have this sense of identity crisis. For me, I was born before '99, the handover of Macau to China. But honestly, my identity was shaped after '99. So for me, I do not have that crisis in terms of identity. I don't feel that much confusion. in terms of that. Yet, when it comes to getting along with people, people might have certain expectation in terms of your age. Like you should do this and do that when it comes to this age, or when it comes to sexual orientation or the concept of marriage. There are lots of limitations in this society. We know how to behave, yet do we wish to behave? Maybe these questions are things I investigate in my writing. And there comes stories and my creativity. So for Lin Ge's book, the name's called Out of Tune, and there's a short story also under the same title. It happens, there's a monologue there by this new immigrant, which is now I read the book, the monologue. She thought that in this city everyone has an English name, so I name myself Anna, which is symmetrical. Language is the first step of this city. This city becomes my ending, my destination. Anna has no way to move forward and to go back. From now on, Anna will write in traditional Chinese characters and speak Cantonese. Anna is not afraid of change herself, but Anna afraid that the city will change her. So for me, I'm also a new immigrant to Macau. After coming to a new place and you fell in love with this place, for me, I do have an English name, Joe. This is the name I chose for myself. You know, see, here in Macau, everyone has an English name, right? You need to name yourself. And then I started speaking Cantonese here to write traditional Chinese characters and started assimilating into this city. Of course, you love this city. But at the same time, the city is ever-changing as well itself. So for characters, Anna, in this book, Anna says, I worry the city might change, but the city is inevitably changing, right? So let's talk about Macau people. This term, Macau people. Even the 4 characters in Lauren's book. And what is the term Macau people? How to define? The city has been changing constantly. And for this generation, the concept of Macau people might be different than that of previous generations, right? So for example, when we look at the new generations, we might have lots of grumblings and surprises. Like, oh, why these people are like this? Why these people have this new skills and talents? You know, different surprises. Maybe the newer generations always have different views towards the older generations. When it comes to identity, it's always fluid and ever changing. How do you see?
Well, as we are from different generations, we have different feelings or opinions about things. So in that generation, in the 70s or 80s, so we now have a very ambiguous feeling of our own identity. Even if we hold our passport, our Portuguese or SAR passport or BNO passport, or when we go to Taiwan, which passport should we bring with us? So we have a very ambiguous feeling in terms of identity. And you have to think about which identity card or passport to carry with you. So it's not very clear. But for the people, we can identify it clearly. We know this person or tourist is from Hong Kong or from Macau. So in the past, those people from Hong Kong, they usually wore suit. And in Cantonese, we say as 西裝友, which means people wearing suit. So it's like they are more rich or well-off people. And so, from their appearance or outfit, we can quickly identify where they're from. And even in Macau and Hong Kong, for the Cantonese that we are speaking, sometimes we use different expressions as well. And so, from how they speak, we can also identify where they are from. And so, we don't confuse ourselves with people from Hong Kong and Macau. And when you go to Hong Kong, the tourists they have to they need to get a certain pass to get to Hong Kong, and now sometimes we get ambiguous about it, and we don't know where we are sometimes, whether we are in Japan, in Taiwan, or in Macau, or in Canada. And so now I think it's become more ambiguous and vague in terms of identity. And when you want to apply for the green card or the passport, the Canadian passport, the Hong Kong ID, and why not? And I think we are not putting a very strong emphasis on identity. And well, from my point of view, I think from the place where I was born and raised, I think we've been receiving a lot of messages or information. And I think Macau is not like an internationally renowned place in the world. And for us who are of this generation, we don't have a very definite identity. And for example, for people from mainland China, they might feel like the life in Macau is different. And for we people in Macau, we've already get used or get accustomed to this kind of life. And we might be in search of a more definite identity. But actually, we don't really care a lot about it. Well, I think nowadays, people are not very definite about their identity, and they don't really care whether they are people from Macau or what identity they are holding. So whenever they are traveling, and they will try to accommodate to the cultural situation, to express themselves in terms of identity. Sometimes you might say, I'm from Hong Kong, I'm from Macau, because some of us, we hold both Hong Kong and Macau IDs. So we will try to see which identity is beneficial to themselves. And we are more flexible in terms of this identity. Well, for us in the past, we were more, we cared more about our true identity. And we are not talking about like marginalizing or this xenophobic idea. And we are not saying that one particular ID is better than another. But in the past, it's different. Many people wanted to obtain a Hong Kong ID card. So people in Macau felt inferior to them because we were poor, and we were not able to see more of the world than those people in Hong Kong. But now things have changed, and there were many people in Macau who try to get to Hong Kong in an illegal way. And yeah, I learned about that. Those people in Macau, they travel all the way in a boat to Hong Kong, like in the 50s, and they didn't have the ID or the pass. And the custom in Hong Kong and ask these people, these illegal immigrants, to speak Cantonese. And the people will talk in Cantonese, for example, to name a street. So they just want to make sure that they can speak Cantonese. And then the custom, the people, the officials will ask them to speak Cantonese. Well, when I was little, when I traveled to Hong Kong, when I don't have any identification to prove that we are a mother and child relationship, and then the officer will ask me to call mom, so to make sure that she's my mom. So yeah, if I didn't call my mom, I didn't know what's going to happen. And so that's very interesting. And identity is now changing. And nowadays, people in Macau, as a community, people might not realize this, but when we travel outside Macau, we may have this feeling. For example, on Facebook, I saw some posts like the shops that only people in Macau know, or the expressions only people in Macau will speak. And well, for me, I think there are not many local or signature shops in Macau now, and I don't know there are a lot of shops like this. There are many chain shops, for example, Starbucks coffee. And so if you ask any people in Macau, the cafes that you often go to, they might say Starbucks or IKEA. So many of the shops, they are not Macau brands, so it's different. And Macau used to be like a small and quiet city, and it's just like an individual, small little city on its own. And now it's changed. In the past decade, we've grown a lot and developed a lot, and economically, and we got lots of investments and shops and the emerging of people from different countries. So in terms of economy, and we have experienced a lot of changes. So in terms of creation, do you think there is any impact to you on this? Well, I think Macau is a place where there's a lot of mobile population. And there are lots of people who were born and raised in Macau, but there are many people who travel in and out of Macau. And in building a Macau culture, it becomes kind of difficult. So we have lots of information coming in, and people are very receptive in Macau. And people are also facing a lot of competition. And we also face competition, but we are also welcoming new creations or new changes or cross-language creation, because we have Chinese. We are like a platform for Chinese and Portuguese culture. And in China, for example, we might not have many translations of like Portuguese works, but in Macau, we can make it happen. And for example, in Hong Kong, they will also translate the work of some less popular writers, and they will introduce them into the market in Hong Kong and Macau. So in this way, we are able to get in touch with more creation, for example, visual works. And there is a lot of a collaboration in Hong Kong and Macau, and people can access to these resources easily. And when we try to find opportunities in creation, there are a lot that we can find. So how can we try to bring the local culture or local stuff, and how we can try to conclude them or express this culture or the essence of Macau to people outside Macau. That's the challenging part. Well, for the traditions of Macau, we can find a lot of information related to that. However, for the daily happenings in Macau, when compared to cities in other countries, for example, when compared to international cities, Macau has its own uniqueness. So, in terms of creation, when I see that there are lots of mobile population, we can also take a glimpse into that. But the difficult part is that because we are facing this mobile culture, it's difficult to find a very definite one or definite culture. Well, for me, I think in terms of creation or writing, and the economic development has definitely given us very positive impacts. And we get more sponsorships, which help writers to survive. And we all welcome it. So we are all here for the literary festival because we have sponsorships. And sponsorships help to keep writers writing and creation. But sometimes we also get discouraged because we realize that we can't make much money with our writing or creation. And in the past, we were poor, and now when we realize that everyone is pretty well off, and we are doing our own creation and not making money, we feel discouraged. Well, with better economic situation, which allows us to connect with the world, and take the literary festival as an example. This is the 9th year already, and it's a bridge, a platform linking us. And in the past, when the economic situation wasn't that good, I don't think it's easy for us to make it happen. So when we talk about creation, or when you write stories, it's just for the sake of writing stories. And we didn't think about making money out of it, because many of us have already got a full-time job, and writing is just writing poetry or writing novels. It's just like a hobby. And this happens to us, right? So the growth of economy is an opportunity, and the new media also helps us. For example, for your work, your drama, and we've also got a market, and we got new topics about the city to work on. And now we have a more organized mode of writing or topics to work on. And we can try to develop it into something even bigger with the sources that we have. And so for both of you, as cross-generation writers, and I know Lin Ge works for magazines and newspapers, and you're also a graphic designer, illustrator, and I think you use a pretty much more universal language to express your work.
So for Lawrence, you're also a playwright, right? You're a playwright, and then your stories are transposed and transformed and into a stage play, or even on a script write in a movie. You know, I like one of your stories that's actually now being adapted into a movie from a play, a theater play. That one's actually a very absurd play. The story was about a group of crazy people who are stealing things and robbing things. So it's called the play. It's called Project Ragged. So see, obviously now we have more freedom, more possibilities in various media. Definitely yes, we have more creative space now. It's in a way a translation, translated from literature into other media. I believe all artistries are connected because they have all these commonalities, so it can be translated in a way. We can translate a novel into a picture book or into a stage play, or translate it and transform into a movie. You know, starting off from a text and transform itself into something more visual. That it's possible now because people feels easy. People feel easier to receive information through visuals. Yet I still believe now we have a industry, right? Like this ecological loop. Maybe in the future, there's some movies can go backward. A movie can transform into a picture book and then eventually became a text, right? So there's this chain. It can go both ways. If it happens, then I believe people will not only rely on words and literature to understand the world, but through various means. And that is actually healthy for everyone to understand the world in various means. So when we talk about literature, people always think it's connected with words, right, and language. Right, since we have this literary festival here, we do have lots of things, lots of different media. We have movies, screening, we have, plays and all that. All of this can be called literature in a way. So you mentioned about my book, my play, Project Ragged. I remember years ago, there was this a competition, and I wrote this play. And it got awarded, and eventually it was adapted into a play, a theater production, and then now became a movie, right? So let me talk about the city, the face of a city, being ambiguous and vague. What do you think? I think it's hard for us to deny that when the city is connected to the outside world, when it becomes more internationalized, a global city. The downside is that we can't recognize ourselves anymore. When I ask you a question, what is the local and unique Macau brand? Can you come up anything? It's actually difficult for us to think about that. Only the global brands came to our mind now. How many made in Macau stuff are left here? The Macau brands are left here. This is what I was talking about, the ambiguity. Our face is being blurred and vague because of the globalization. and internationalization. You know, I remember when I went to mainland China, people know things that's very famous stuff in Macau, and those that I don't even know, right? When someone mentioned to me, "Oh, there's this very famous restaurants and in Macau," and I was not really realized and aware of that even, you know. It's the Macau they see is quite different than the Macau that we see inside Macau. For the people in mainland China, the image of Macau in their mind, it's quite different than ours. You know, we keep talking about Macau's ever changing. It keeps constantly changing and transforming itself. For example, some people no longer live in Macau. They move to Zhuhai to live and work here in Macau. You know, this is a kind of trend that's happening now. So, do you think it's a opportunity, and also, or maybe it's a challenge or an impact that the sense of Macau is getting blurred and ambiguous? I believe yes, it's blurred and ambiguous to some extent. You know, sceneries and surroundings can be changed, yet certain things will stay. The culture will stay. I believe the culture will stay. What culture? Culinary culture and food culture, right? That's why. That's why we need all these local artists and talents, right? Because otherwise we will be we will be flooded by globalization. Let's say the nata, the egg tart, the Portuguese egg tart. This is uniquely Macau, and all the almond cookies, for example. All of these have local, very unique local food culture. This will not be wiped out, I believe. Yeah, this is a very interesting imagination. I wrote something before, a sci-fi story. I imagine how Macau will be like in 500 years later. You know, maybe I can challenge you. Maybe almond cookies are gone, right, by then. But for me, personally, I think this ambiguity can be an opportunity for us. You know, everyone sees life differently, yet, but at the same time and space, people see differently. For writers, we are constructing something new from different perspectives in our works. Like, people see Macau outside Macau and how we see Macau, they are different. Which one's correct? Which one's the real Macau, right? Yet I would judge and challenge what it means to be the real Macau, right? If there should be more people to interpret Macau. For example, Lawrence wrote a Macau that's different than the Macau that I'm writing about, right? No, there's no one single representative of Macau, including the works and the images and the episodes and silhouettes that the other writers captured about Macau. They are also important, and they are also very valuable for readers, and they are all the images of Macau, in my opinion. So for me, that is a very good thing. I believe yes. When when it comes to writing, we use words and literature to describe and to document the people here. Yeah, because I write as well. I will write on a paper and allow the story flow and grow. For example, when it comes to a director who made a cool movie, or some other people, they will create a movie about Macanese people. Maybe that can go the other way around. Like after movies, then it will grow into a novel, for example, just like Lin Ge mentioned just now. The playwright was not necessarily a complete work, but eventually it can transform and translate it into a book. You know, movie as a genre is way more accessible to the mass public, right? We see lots of crossover or collaborations between directors and writers as well. So I believe in the future for both of you, maybe you will see more opportunities when it comes to your works. It's possible. So, sorry. Do you guys have any questions? Any questions from the floor? We can open the floor and.
Anyone want to raise any questions? We can. Here is a very rare chance we can discuss. 有冇人咁問？好 please.
Good afternoon. I would like to put the question to Lawrence Lay and to Lin Ge. But first of all, I would like to say that this is a standing panel.
我必須要講啦，今次係非常之好嘅一個對談，好感謝咁多位咧都可以參加呢個對談，以及咧今朝早嘅兒童文學嘅工作坊，尤其是咧林格咧創作咗為我哋嘅文學節咧創作咗好靚嘅主視覺，同時咧李月亮本身咧都係好積極參與我哋文學節嘅活動，我真係非常感謝。Joe 啦，你都係，你由我哋文學節一開始就已經支持我哋啦。以唔同嘅身份啦，作家嘅身份，以及出版人嘅身份啦，等等，亦都我哋咧亦都出版咗你嘅作品啦，用3種語言去出版你嘅作品。對於我哋嚟講，喺過去咧呢件事都係非常之重要，亦都係好榮幸嘅。同時我哋啱講到澳門，你用好多資料搜集啊，去揾好多澳門過去嘅歷史事件等等。當你創作嘅時候，你都去做好多調查，你用好多唔同嘅資料啦，包括係葡文嘅嘢啊，或者英文嘅嘢啊，中文嘅資料。我好好奇嘅就係李月亮啊同埋林格，你哋會唔會有一啲好特別嘅感覺？就係當你睇緊一啲葡國作家，又或者係非中文嘅作家咧，當佢哋寫故事嘅時候，會好對你你會好驚喜，或者會對你好有衝擊嘅。同埋咧，另一個問題就係呢一啲作品點樣去幫助你嘅作品啊？尤其是咧翻譯嚟講到翻譯作品嘅時候咧，係對你嘅作品有啲咩影響
？Well, I'd like you both to share about language, the issue of language. So when you read the Portuguese or English version of the works, so like in terms of translation, how would this affect your creation, or how would it help with their creation? 首先嚟講啦，咁外語啦，譬如葡文。葡文嚟講，其實對於我嚟講都有好大嘅影響，因為譬如葡文名啦，我唔知啦，譬如中文名大邊字的誘惑，係菲力奇嘅 ，so it's written by Fernandez 係嘛？Eric Desena Fernandes。其實我係翻譯咗啦，由咩單字？係我講緊嘅係。 我對於佢係好感興趣嘅呢本小説，咁我就將佢翻譯咗成為一個舞蹈嘅版本啦。咁所以將佢成為一個係本地化嘅一個作品，亦都成為咗一個澳門嘅製作啦。可以咁你知道澳門係一個好細嘅城市啦。咁其實喺澳門嘅作品咧，有時好難走出去。咁我哋都希望可以有更多嘅讀者啊、海外嘅觀眾啊，可以睇到、欣賞到我哋嘅作品。所以翻譯其實對於我哋嚟講好重要啦，幫助亦都好大。對於澳門嘅創作人嚟講，其實好重要。好，咁我講翻廣東話。Well, I think when I read those creations written in Portuguese, especially for the poetry, when I read them being translated into Chinese, I think for different translation of poetries, they give me different feelings. And for example, when we are talking about Pessoa's poetry, I feel something different when I read one translation of it. However, when I read different translations and other translations of that, I feel something different. And the translation of novels or stories or the bestsellers, I think it enables people to understand the culture of that particular book. And poetry is something that connects us, no matter which language it's written, when it's being translated. We can all get the same message to different people in speaking different languages. And poetry translation is really challenging. And for me, I'm not good in English and Portuguese, so when I read some poets written by Portuguese writers or poets, I'll try to read the English translation, and then I will read the Chinese translation and try to understand what the poetry means. So a good translation is very essential to the work itself. So any other questions? So I see many people are having many questions. So time is tight. So I'd like to invite you both to raise your questions, and then we'll answer them together. My question is about identity. And Lin Ge mentioned about the difficulty of finding the special feature or the uniqueness of Macau. And well, for me, when I have to talk about the identification or the shops that are particular in Macau, do you think there are any particular terms that Macau people will speak or express themselves? And I think in Macau, we are very vague in terms of this. And I think it's very difficult for us to find the spirit of Macau. Are we really in a harmonious state? And this is how we live our lives. So, Joe, you mentioned about being a new immigrant, and you're coming from another place. So, how did you feel about people in Macau at that time when you first arrived? So now you've been living in Macau for quite some time. What do you think about Macau and its people? And the second question is about cross-generation writing. No matter it's about reading or writing, printed books give us a sense of security. So you talk about how we used to write on papers in the past when we try to create. But now with the technology that we have, how are you viewing the change in yourself are you going to process all your work with the computer instead of writing them on papers? And even for finding resources, are you trying to read them online instead of reading the real books? And so this have an impact on your way of creation. Because time is tight, we'll let the other audience raise his questions as well. How about you answer her questions first, because I've also got lots of questions to ask. Okay, so let them respond to her questions first. Well, briefly speaking, well, I agree with you that Hong Kong has its own spirit or core value. And in Macau, it's a bit different because we might not have not that rich culture, but we also have our own core value and spirit. We have the people. That's what we appreciate, because we people are the essence of Macau. But do people treat others the same like before? So how can you define the essence or the spirit of Macau? I think it really depends on the people, and it's the sense of people and community. And we don't have manuscripts right now. Now we all type with our computers, and it speeds up our creation. And it's really a big difference. In the past, when we used to write on papers, it's difficult for us to edit. But now it's just very convenient. And so it's very easy for us to create. And now we read e-books, and we read on phones. So you can spend a lot of time reading while waiting for people, for example. But in the it's difficult to carry books with us when we go out. And how about Lin Ge? When we have to find a keyword to describe Macau, I really don't have one. But I think Macau has different perspectives, and the world keeps changing. And so we have to look back to the past. So Macau has changed due to different reasons. When we study history, from the beginning of the opening of Macau as a small port, and how the Portuguese landed and lived with the people here, and now with the Macau heritage and a lot of history related to this, we understand that there were people who experienced everything and pass it on. And we learn from the past generation. And we learn things that were inherited from them. Even though I can't sum up with a keyword about Macau, I think through my work, you may get some meaning or understanding of Macau. And for me, as a cross-generation writer, I think I'm still experiencing changes. So as a designer, a graphic designer, the books or sketchbooks are very important for me. I used to carry them along with me. Now I try to use my phone. For example, I eavesdrop people while I have lunch, and then I will jot them down in my notebook. And I used to think that it's not a good idea to jot my notes on the phone, but now I've changed. I found my way to jot down my notes, but everyone has their own way of using their mobile phone in jotting notes. And when I write on papers, I try to write more. So I'm also going to answer you briefly. So I've been here for like 30 years. And I have experienced a lot of changes in Macau. And there are a lot that I could share. I'd love to share with you, but time is limited. But I can talk about my first impression on the people in Macau. I felt like they were not very friendly. However, when I get accustomed to them, when I know them more, I feel like I can mingle with them. And for creation or writing, I used to write on papers, but now I use my phone most of the time. Sometimes I use the audio function but I start picking up writing on papers again because I want to slow down my speed on writing. When I try to write on a paper, I can count the words. Like I will write 400 words a day. And when you write on the phone, sometimes you type very quickly. So I try to write on the paper. I try to limit myself to write up to like 400 words per day so I can process my idea. And I believe that I try to work more on people, and everything is changing and updating every day. And I'm very happy to be here in the literary festival, and I hope to share with you more next time. Thank you everyone.